just over a year ago. Then CEO of Twitter Jack Dorsey sold his first tweet as an NFT for $2.9 million. It wasn't just his first tweet, of course, but it was the first tweet, which, as auctions go for crypto and NFT heads, was about as appealing as it gets. The sale was a welcome green flag to early advocates in the NFT space that the winds of blockchain were blowing ever more in their favour. And of course, along with Beeple's Every Day's the first 5,000 days selling for $69 million, the line was behaving precisely as foretold. Prices were going up, and only up. But that was over a year ago. Now, the owner of the Twitter-spawned NFT has been seeking to flip his purchase and capitalize on his one-year gains, except there's a problem. In the first week of open bidding, the highest offer was just shy of $10,000, roughly 0.3% of the original sale value. So what the hell happened? We're going to dissect the collapse of NFTs. First off, we need to talk about the growing reticence among the general public to embrace this kind of bleeding edge tech. As far as we've been able to discern, this appears to have been born out of a combination of three specific factors. The first is that people have grown skeptical of the technology and its products. The second revolves around the floating questions of so-called ownership. And the third is the incessant, rampant, and increasingly spectacled and lampooned fraud that has swept the crypto space in general. So let's take a look at the latter first. The concept of a so-called rug pull is essential in understanding much of the crypto-related backlash in recent years, so let's break one down. Primarily, a rug pull is when developers create a crypto token, promote it to pump up the price, and finally pull as much value out before abandoning the project altogether. The price drops to zero, and everyone who invested loses every iota of what was staked. These scams are more than prevalent. They are, in the internet zeitgeist of our time, positively ubiquitous. In fact, this is so much the case that, with NFTs inherently wrapped up in the nature of the crypto space, there are variations of this kind of scam for them too. One of the largest occurred just a few months ago on a blockchain-based game called Axie Infinity, where players buy NFTs to use in-game and which have utility in battling and breeding what are essentially this world's version of Pokemon, these cartoon axolotls. Because of what has been described as a permissions error, however, an agent who remains unknown, at least at the time of writing, was able to steal $625 million. It is strongly suspected that this quote-unquote hacker was a project insider, certainly qualifying it as a rug pull if true. Rug pulls aside, the NFT market has had its own unique fraud to deal with. OpenSea, the leading marketplace for NFTs, reported early this year that over 80% of the NFTs created for free on the platform are, quote, plagiarized works, fake collections, and spam. Artists from all over the internet are rightfully frustrated to learn that their work is being plagiarized in the minting of NFTs that are then sold under the pretext of legitimately supporting the artist. The blockchain, unfortunately, cannot determine whether a creative work is authentic or not. Some fraudsters are even artificially boosting the value of NFTs they have already purchased by selling it to themselves multiple times through different channels, fabricating a false purchase history that would be appealing to prospective and unwitting investors. When we talk about NFTs and ownership, we have to appreciate that purchasing an NFT gives one no more rights as an owner than, say, purchasing an original painting by Gauguin. The work is non-fungible in the sense that only one exists, but the physical painting could also only be recreated and distributed by the copyright holder. Owning the physical work alone does not, at least not necessarily, equate to owning the copyright. And it's the same with most NFTs. Unless the terms of purchase specifically allow it, the ability for buyers to share the creative work on public platforms or reproduce it and make it available for others is strictly limited. Most owners do not realize this, and if sharing the likeness of their product openly could well be in breach of copyright. Then there are the issues inherent on the tech side. We've stated it before in one of our TikTok videos that purchasing an NFT is not equivalent to purchasing a physical object. One rather purchases something likened to a certificate of authentication. a collection of metadata that defines what you own. But what if you lose that certificate? The proof of NFT ownership is often stored on a static URL, wherever it is that might be stored online. However, the problem is that it has to be stored somewhere, which opens up the risk of link rot. Links can and do break. You know this, I know this. We find them what feels every other day. And as Aaron Parzanowski wrote in Speaking to The Verge, that's an awfully expensive 404 error. Digital tokens, we should not be shocked to learn, suffer from the same issue that a true archiving of the internet at large suffers from, that anything can break, and when it does, there's no promise that it'll ever be fixed. In fact, if anything, odds are it's lost forever. As part of my deep dive into the state of the NFT market, I recently interviewed Bryce Johnson, also known as Brycent, co-founder of Loot Squad and almost certainly the most prominent Web3-based gaming influencer right now. Here's a quick overview. Do you see NFTs going mainstream, or do you see them remaining these niche community-supported fixtures in the future?
I think they can go mainstream, but as I talk to people about the concepts of how you make them mainstream, it's focused on how you use wording that is very relevant to traditional pop culture. I think the biggest issue with NFTs is that we use the word NFT to describe things that are already a fixture in other industries. Like for gaming, you don't need to use the word NFT to describe gaming or describe the content that you're creating around gaming. You should just call them skins. In CSGO, they call them skins, and we know how popular that was. Valorant, they're called skins. They're called, camos or cosmetics in other games. But if you even search NFT game and skins in like Google Trends, you'll see that skins severely outdominates in terms of Google search results. So ideally, I think in all facets of industries, it needs to be a thing where we stop calling things NFTs, because NFT is just the technology of what it is. It's a non-fungible token, but the descriptive nature of the word on top of it that describes that category or option as to why people like what they like. Art is just art. If you buy it digital, you bought digital art. It doesn't always have to be, oh, I bought this NFT. I think that we really dilute ourselves by continuing to just use the word NFT to describe a category of things that for the longest time have been considered very complex, very descriptive, very detailed, and have a unspoken word of just pure creativity. So I think the word NFT is actually kind of like a dilution for what we're building.
That's really interesting. That's a really fascinating perspective, because I take your point that a lot of this time, especially when it's such a new space and it's such a new technology, it's almost like you've got a workbench and then you've got your tools, and people keep fixating on the tools rather than what can be done with them, in a way.
Yeah,
I totally get your point. It's a case where everyone's the nomenclature needs to find a way that you can talk about, like the technology needs to progress to such a point that it's married into everything that we do when it comes to, like you say, cosmetics and skins, so that people know inherently that this is what we're talking about when you unlock something in, like Fortnite or Overwatch or whatever. For those of you interested in watching that interview in full, we'll put a link in the description to the full article. But getting back to it, we should note that transformative change is not and has never been an overnight process. When we reflect on what the internet was just 20 years ago, when Google was still not yet a household name, when its access was confined to a wired and usually sole home computer, and when the concept of streaming was simply not even well conceived, let alone well executed, we must realize that whatever we assume now about the future of technology is moot. The only thing we can really be sure of is that when it advances, people will run with it, often in ways we can't even begin to fathom until in the palms of our hands, or, as is more likely in this instance, on-chain. To believe that the internet will remain always only what we knew yesterday is a lie. It was a lie then, and it'll be a lie tomorrow. There's no crystal ball to say where we're going to end up, but right now, there are, as we previously coined, winds of block change, indications in the nature of things as they are now that we can consult for a heading. And the direction that wind is taking us seems to be in the vague sort of direction of Web3 and blockchain. So, are these the first days in the death of NFTs? Hardly. The first market boom is showing sure signs of contraction, but a market that in 2021 was worth roughly $17 billion doesn't just dissipate over a period of a few months. What is more, it is worth highlighting also that just about every market is down right now, course correcting from what Schiller coined as irrational exuberance that's overtaken us over the last few years. Like them or loathe them, in one form or another, NFTs are here to stay. As all markets do, the space will experience volatility, it will enter and exit cycles both predictable and not, and most importantly, it will mature, and over time, even become something wholly different. We'll be there to keep an eye.